Oh, what a day. How's your weekend going?
Well,
Thanks.
it's going on.
What happened? How was your run? How was your socialization?
It was good. I had a good run.
Okay.
My fastest run so far.
Ooh. What made it spectacularly better?
No, my fastest in park run. Well, just because I've been running.
Oh, okay. Of course.
And obviously, as you know, the more you run, the better you get.
Yep. Nice. My day has been kind of... So this is like one weekend where I really didn't plan much. Usually I have like stuff planned. Well, okay, I met up with a friend I've been trying to meet up with for the longest time. She was my mentor in church. So we had breakfast. It finally happened. Then I took Ari swimming. And then I came home. I realized that I needed to clean out her car seats. I don't even know much about children's car seats. Those are like gem collectors. Like... You clean it one day, the next day is almost like, what is
Isn't
going
that
on
everything?
Here? Yeah, and then you can like culture it, you can grow a lot, antibiotic resistant, organisms there.
Are you germophobic? Let's be wait.
I think. Oh wait, don't start doing your psychiatrist, stuff on me. I have an aversion to like germs, like a normal person. Okay, I'm not an animal. I see germs, I wipe away. Okay. So I had to clean out.
And you think you're a normal person? I mean, sure.
No, like, don't you see the germs? Like, you can actually smell them. And they actually release a lot of heat, so you can actually feel them as well. The car seats, I mean, that was like the highlight of my day. Just cleaning it out. I brought all of my cleaning equipment. Like I have like...
Oh, wow, okay.
No,
let's just establish
hold on. You first of all condition it.
Okay.
No, but really, how do you clean stuff? You condition it, you spray it out, you let it sip in, and then you wipe it, and then you then finish up with the antimicrobial wipe, and then you let it.
All right.
I feel very judged right now by you. How dare you? Huh?
You are very judged, though. Hardcore judgment. You don't understand.
But how do you clean stuff? Like, how many cleaning supplies do you have?
I don't understand what you're saying.
Like, when you want to clean, like, wipe your kitchen counter, how do you wipe it off? What do you use?
I don't know. I wipe it when I see dirt. I don't wipe it on the idea of dirt possibly being there.
So what do you use to wipe it? Like, how do you clean?
I don't know. I wash it with soap and water.
Soap and water?
Mm-hmm.
Let's stop talking. I feel like this conversation is going to really impact on our friendship, and it's like I shouldn't have asked. So you don't tell. See, you've never watched Friends. You use an iPhone. You love Apple.
Don't tell.
Yeah, so let's just stop it. I feel like one more thing is going to break our friendship. And so for the sake of peace and ignorance being bliss, let's keep it moving. So it's been a while though.
Gems are when you open your mouth, you are swallowing gems. That's what you want to be stressing about. As you open your mouth like this, me gems.
There's some friendly germs. Okay. There's some friendly germs. Yeah. I'm just really talking about the ones that we need to be, You really didn't have to do that. Hi there. Welcome to the More Sibyl podcast. This is a podcast for Blacks, Asians, and those who love them. I am Mo, and I am your host, ready to spark your curiosity as I take you on this adventurous ride of exploring cultures through the stories of my guests from all over the world. On this show, we get really personal, discussing salient issues that are relevant to our contemporary age and also building community around them. As our guests exercise courage and vulnerability in sharing their life's experiences, we hope that in turn you are inspired by them and that you get the courage needed to set your own stories free. Enjoy the ride, and thank you so much for listening. So, it's been a while we had our little one-on-one stuff, and I just realized that, my God, we haven't done something in a while.
Yeah, I know. And I missed the one-on-ones actually.
Seriously, because it was really a time to kind of catch up since we hardly do phone calls. Well, it was
wait, so are we talking about one-on-one like chat or podcast?
One-on-one podcast, and even one-on-one. No, we had that. How many was it? 2-3 weeks ago? We talked about 4 hours.
Yes.
Yeah, that
that was 1 month.
That was 1 month, yeah, at least, yeah. We're due for another one, maybe in the next 4 weeks. But I mean, like one-on-one on the podcast where we just,
Yeah.
The last one we did was on superpowers. Best believe it.
Wow. Yeah, that's true. Because I was trying to send it to someone, and then I realized that I had to go that far back to find one to send.
Yes. So, I think we have like a slew of topics that we definitely need to cover. But do you want to tell the audience? Well, let's even do an introduction.
I don't know if I asked. Sorry,
go ahead. What did you want to say?
I feel like, see, in my mind, we've already done the introduction. No?
But we know how to say, hi, this is Moen.
I know. But I'm just saying, that we'll do that introduction. But I mean, like, we can start with the. So, welcome, everybody. The two are back. I'm going to say the two is back. I feel like at this point, it's an ease for the two. Anyway.
Exactly.
But,
it's like stating the obvious,
so
right?
This is Mo, Sibyl, and
Ayomide.
At this point, we're going to assume that you know who is who.
Yes. Hint.
Even if you flip the intro.
Oh my goodness. Long time no discussion of like one-on-ones. I think we've had like wonderful guests so far. Yeah. It's about time when you kind of put one on the books.
Yes. And to be fair, we did have, the whole sort of father, we had mental health.
Mental health month.
And then we had fatherhood month.
Yeah.
So, we've been busy.
Yeah. Things to do for you guys.
So and I think today we're talking about power.
Yes, for Nigerians, it's not like
not electric
Nepal.
Power.
Exactly. And it's not Power, the series.
I hate how we're making the same joke.
Stop, climb out of my head, Ayomide, okay? It's not the series Power.
So we're talking about power.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I mean, I think we're going to have to explain, because I was going to actually try to explain, but I realized the explanation itself is going to have to be part of the conversation, because
we don't want to lose half of
I think
our
to sort of give a sort of trailer. The power we're going to be talking about is sort of power dynamics in relationships, and by relationships, not just when people hear relationships. When people hear relationships, the first thing it's funny how we use the word relationships to mean romance.
I know, right?
And then when I want to talk about relationships in general, I have to sort of, footnote it with, and I mean all relationships, from friendship to work, and yes, including romance, obviously, but relationships in general.
Yep.
So that's I think that's what we thought we would like to talk about today.
Yeah.
What comes to your mind when you think, like, that's not the right question, but like when you think of power, what's the thing that's sort of the first sort of thing you focus on, or the thing that you tend to? What's your sort of prominent thought around that?
I think I see it like we all have some power we bring into relationships, and it's not always constant, right? And I think even going back to that superhero analogy you always use, is that I use it to help other people, or you use it to help yourself, right? And you can't always be a victim in every situation, but you can be a villain in a situation that, it's like it's even above and beyond some social construct to use. Like, for example, and this is probably a very horrible example, whites cannot always be the oppressors and blacks cannot always be the victim. And in whatever spaces we are, it's just understanding what's your power. Are you using it to dominate and subjugate others? And also, what's the word? Acknowledging just some of the privileges you might have. So that's one of the things that comes to mind. And I think there's also a layer of faith, which I think we can explore. And how Christians, for example, now, like maybe this is not even the right, like when we talked about the Roe v. Wade thing and all of that. Yeah. So, but let's just stop here before we go into the dark side. But how about you?
Yeah, I think actually maybe actually, sorry, just you that last bit
It threw you off, right?
It's not threw me off. It's tempting me to
say something,
to want to pursue further.
Yeah.
But I think all I will say is I think we should probably have a separate conversation on power with respect to Christianity and, in Christian history.
Yeah.
And maybe from there to organizations and religions, maybe in general.
Yeah.
But I think maybe more Christianity because that's the one we know.
We know, yeah.
Before we speak too much nonsense about
what we
don't know.
I know, right? And I think maybe another way to, sorry, you remember how what actually started, we've always had conversations, you and I, about power. But I think the more recent one was about that MIT professor, David Sabatini, the story about, him being kicked out of the lab because of, power imbalance. And the question was, was that like a what's the word? Quid pro quo situation where someone in a place of authority was usurping that over, a female lab member and things like that. And I mean, the story what we know is what we know. We really don't know where the truth really lies. But I think that really sparked the conversation about who had power there. Was it the woman in the relationship? Because she's doing way better than the guy was. And we also talked about some of the losses, the discoveries and all that potentially ended with him not being able to do his research anymore. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's complicated. I think it's complicated. I think maybe a good way to talk about it would be to start with our own experiences, I suppose, because I think it's easy to want to go abstract with these things.
I know. I was about to say,
abstract,
we don't
general.
want to lose half of our audience. Like, what are they talking about?
Well, it's not even so much even about losing our audience. There's a danger of losing ourselves because
like save yourself first.
Not even that. It's more like, for me, it's more like something I think about a lot is how the older I get, the more I'm finding myself feeling grounded in, the biblical command to love your neighbor
as you love yourself.
But like the concreteness of that, right?
Yeah.
It's because I think there's this tendency, I think, that we have as humans to want to, so to speak, I remember this, I can't remember who it was, one of the older comics who said something about, one of these quips about, oh, I love the world, it's my neighbor I can't stand. Right? And
was it Dave Chappelle? It sounds like something Dave Chappelle would say.
No, it's one of the older comics, maybe like Mark Twain old.
Oh, okay.
That far back or something. And I think about that a lot. And the point of it is, there's a sense in which things are easy to talk about easy to talk about is not the word. Easy to generalize in a broad sense that actually leaves us feeling helpless. Because, let's say I love the world, but what am I going to do for the world? Because the world is big and then I feel helpless. But what I can do? I can help this one person in front of me right now. And interestingly, there's the story of the Good Samaritan, which is a story that was told in answer to, well, who is my neighbor? It's basically saying, well, your neighbor is the person in front of you right now. Right. And the concreteness of that grounds me, because as the world becomes increasingly globalized and sort of bigger and smaller at the same time, I think there's an increasing tendency, I think, in many of us to become also overwhelmed. Right? You turn on Twitter and it's a fire hose of information from everywhere. and then what are you going to do, right? How many things can you care about?
Yep.
Right? And on one hand, you don't want to not care about the big things, even though they're not affecting you in the moment.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, what can you do about those big things? Right? And so there's a beautiful concreteness in remembering that no matter what you want to do or think, or how much you want to care about big things happening all over the world, it's important to remember to love your neighbor, to care about the human in front of you right now.
Yep.
So it's the place and time of it, isn't it? It's the in front of you and the right now, right?
Yeah.
Like the here and now of it, basically. And so that's kind of what I'm thinking about with regards to power as well. Like, yeah, like let's maybe set aside the Sabatinis and the
Roe v. Wade and
sort of the big things, and get down to the, what can we learn from our own experiences, and then how can that help us in the future experiences that we will have, right? Sort of localizing it and grounding it, because I think once you're grounded, then it's easier to think about those bigger things rather than trying to start with those bigger things, and then you're just sort of at sea, literally. There's always power, like even in just normal friendships, whether it's even male to male and female to female. Like even for us, for instance, I know you like to see me as sort of like the senior friend, right? Like there's that sort of like, you playfully acknowledge it, but there's still that power thing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I think about the fact that, and then of course, both of us have senior friends. You have, you have people in your life that you're friends with, but you see them as like, whether you call them mentors or uncles and aunties or whatever, right? I don't want to mention their name. I don't know if it's okay to mention their name,
sure.
But there's that couple that,
the couple that of course now. Yes. Yeah. It's okay. They've been on the show. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a power thing there. Do you see what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But, and both of you understand where the power lies. And so for me, it's this thing that is in everything, and yet we don't like to talk about it. And I think part of it is the almost this sense of power as like a bad thing. So talking about it becomes difficult because, of course, if it's a bad thing, then you don't want to say that. It's almost like if you say this friendship or this relationship has a bad thing, then that makes it a bad friendship. Almost like automatically toxic. And it's like, no, it's important to understand like power is just a thing. And then there's abuses of it.
Yeah.
And then when there are abuses of it, then you have toxicity.
Yeah.
But the existence of power is just it's a characteristic of reality, so to speak, of human relationships, which in itself is just a neutral thing. Yeah. That can then be
weaponized or
misused or abused or beautifully used.
Yeah.
I think so for an example would be the fact that some of the most beautiful relationships in many people's lives are relationships where someone used their power
for good
to serve them in a beautiful way.
Yeah.
Whether it was to lift you up, whether it was a teacher, whether it was a parent, or whether it was a friend that helped you in a time of need.
Yeah.
Right? It's do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's the same thing.
It's a side of a coin, depending on how you, or even a sword, depending on how you wield it, right? So would you say then that power is at the root of human relationships and also their problems?
I don't even know if saying power. I think power is just a characteristic of human relationships. I won't say it's at the root per se. It's just a characteristic. It's a characteristic as much as I don't even know. As much as I don't know, it's just a characteristic. It's like gravity.
You can't
say gravity is at the root of transportation. It's just something you have to think about and use and work with. But pretending it's not there is definitely not going to help.
Okay, I get so we've done the introduction of it, but I'm still there's a part of me that I feel like, so what is the so what for the listeners? Like, we haven't really gotten to the meat of the discussion.
Oh no, we can talk about practical examples. I'm just sort of
I see.
Defining.
I see. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, if a practical example is for me, work is an example, for instance, right? Where as doctors, we, because of the history that of abuse that has happened in medicine in the past, there are a lot of limitations and checks and balances to our power as doctors. Because the fact is, as a doctor, you have power, right? And it's a power that people give us, right? Because people say, a patient basically comes to you and says, I have a problem and I'm going to put my life in your hands.
Literally.
Right? Sometimes quite literally, like as in the case of, say, a surgeon, where you literally allow a human being like you to knock you out cold.
And you have faith that they're going to bring you back.
In order to actually cut you with a knife, right? And you have no idea what's going on, and you wake up, and then they say, this is what we did.
Hope that they're able to bring you back.
Well, exactly.
Because at that point, you are very close to death. Like, you're second around death.
Exactly. Yeah. It's and the fact that people do this all the time is a huge thing. It's a huge level of trust that the person is placing in the medical doctor and the team. But in that moment, that trust gives the person power. And that's another thing that I think is what coming back to that. To trust someone is to give them some measure of power over us. Right? And when people find it difficult to trust, there's a sense in which we can think of it. So I think the way I'm wanting, the way I'm coming to see this is that power is a model, or power dynamics is a model that is useful for thinking about relationships. There's many models, obviously, but I think this is one of the more important models that's useful for thinking about certain aspects of relationship that I think are difficult to sort of appreciate without it. So for me, that's a massive amount of power, right? And then as psychiatrists, there's another degree where we have the ability to literally restrict someone's right to liberty.
Oh yeah.
Right? Because they're mentally unwell.
Yeah. Like a 5150 hold,
Yeah, well, we call this section, 2 and 3 here. And I'm sure different places have different other names for them. But, it's all the same thing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But again, this is a power that we're exercising. And again, because it's such a massive power, there's a lot of limitations to it, right? We have to explain it. We have to get a second doctor to assess, and the doctor has to say, well, actually, you know what, I've looked at this person and I've come to the same conclusion as
you have,
this other doctor. I don't know about other, it's like I said, this stuff is different in every country, but in the UK, the person can then appeal against that decision to section them, right, to detain them, and then there's a judge, and there's a member of the public, and there's another doctor. Right? The member of the public is just like a lay member of the public. There's another doctor, and then there's the patient solicitor.
Or the guardian.
And all of that. And no, the solicitor,
like
the actual, like the lawyer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What if the patient is declared compos mentis?
The patient will have a solicitor.
Oh, yeah, okay. So like an attorney of power, like an attorney of power in a way.
No, like an actual lawyer.
Oh, okay.
Like someone who's actually trained in law, not just somebody. You can give power of attorney to anybody,
yeah.
But this is like
lawyer.
the solicitor. Like,
I see.
Because it's a court hearing. It doesn't happen in court necessarily because the patient is in hospital and can't leave. So normally it's done in hospitals and more recently over Zoom. Not Zoom, but like virtually. But it's still a court hearing. It's still a legal event.
But
and the patient can appeal.
Sorry, I don't know why I'm asking this question, but if the
patient can overrule
the patient's appeal, but if the patient is declared non-compos mentis.
No. I mean, they can overrule the doctor's decision to detain the patient.
Okay. Got it.
So it's all of these checks and balances, and sometimes it can feel a bit tedious. But the truth is, at the end of the day, you see something like what happened to Britney Spears.
Oh yeah, conservatorship.
You see why this is necessary because it's to prevent those sorts of things, and they can appeal that section and they can appeal it again. So if it's section 2, which holds them for 28 days, they can appeal it once. If it's section 3, which holds them for up to 6 months, they can appeal it. And then at the end of 6 months, they can appeal it again if you decide to renew it. And then they can appeal it once a year after that.
Wow.
Right? So usually it doesn't last that long in real terms. Occasionally it does for some people who are severely unwell. But the point is that there is all of these opportunities to reverse this stuff. Right? And then there's all of these other people who come in. So the idea of you having a member of the public is somebody who is somebody who like is a member of the public, basically.
Like
somebody who is not a professional.
Like a juror, it's not vested in your personal.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And it's not vested in your professional, nonsense, so to speak. Right? And all that sort of thing. And it's, at the end of the day, it's not like it's a perfect system, but it's the point of it is the idea of introducing all of these limitations.
To prevent abuse. Power.
But then from our point of view and from where we're coming from, and this is the work that I have to do with patients, is to win their trust, right? Because at the end of the day, the fact is, and this is the ideal thing, the fact is that the power that I have is to serve them with.
Yeah.
Right? And I think of it as sort of the same power that a lifeguard has if you're drowning in the water. Right? You want the lifeguard to be powerful enough to get you out of there.
Yeah.
You don't want them to be tired and struggling.
Yeah, or they can't swim.
Exactly. You want them to have exactly. You want them to have the ability to swim, which is a kind of sort of power in itself, in a sense. You want them to have physical strength.
Yeah.
You want them to have, and not just the ability to swim, but the ability to swim for however long it will take to get you out of there. And whatever ability, you also want them to have whatever ability they will need to navigate whatever it is that got you struggling in the first place, which might simply be your inability to swim, but it might also be other things in the water that you need to deal with.
And you have to also believe that they are vested in making sure that you make it out alive. That's another layer of the trust,
Right, exactly. But the point is, the power that they have is to serve you with.
Yeah.
Right? And like, I think CSV said once that if you're in a hole, actually, CSV is not, I'm making this up, but basically, if you're in a hole,
it doesn't matter.
It's nice to have someone in the hole with you, but what you want more than anything else is somebody who is not in the hole with you to pull you out.
Pull you out of it,
Right?
Yeah.
There's a place for empathy, but there's also a place for help, for actual help. Right? And it's sort of the challenge of like, how do you win someone's trust? Because many people have experienced power in negative senses, as they've been oppressed by it, they've been abused by it.
Yeah.
There's that tendency to think of power automatically negative.
Yeah.
And when people realize, oh, this person has power over me, then you have the work of, how do I help this person to see that if I have any power over you, it is simply to serve you. And nothing more.
Nothing more. But that also, I think it also goes back to relationships and trust, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I guess my question for you would be this: why do you think we're very uncomfortable talking about the power we bring to relationships, and why is it so easily abused by others?
I think the reason we're uncomfortable is because, like, it goes back to the abuse part. The second question is sort of the answer to the first, which is...
You're welcome.
There's a lot of abuse of power. And those abuses are quite egregious because the abuses of power... Because the problem with an abuse of power is that the abuser has power.
Yeah.
And because the abuser has power, they can do damage. They can do pretty serious damage. And if you see enough of that, it becomes very easy to become very skeptical of power.
Yeah.
Having said that, I think that there's a danger because I've seen sort of dynamics where people want to say, oh, there's no power here, we're all equal, nobody is. The danger of that I find is it always ends up being a lie.
Yeah.
Because what then happens is, because we stop talking about what the power dynamics are,
yeah,
it then becomes impossible to talk about the power dynamics. When you say, oh, there's no power dynamics, then it's now easier for
abuse to go
power
unchecked,
dynamics to still be exercised.
Yeah.
But now you can't even talk about it.
And abuse might go unchecked in that situation too.
Oh yeah, it does. Mm-hmm. So you see that often a lot in you see that in a lot of cult settings actually.
Yes.
Like I'm not saying that every we are all equal setting is a cult setting. I'm saying that cult settings tend to use that
a lot, yeah.
Yes. And so I'm not saying it's the same thing, but because they tend to use it, it's easy to see how people can join the two together. But yeah, I think it's almost like saying we're not going to talk about gravity. Then what happens when someone falls? We don't have language for that anymore. Why do people do that? I think it's just our self-interested nature.
Yeah, selfishness at the core of it.
Yeah, the fact that we act in self-interest.
Yeah.
And for me, that again is one of the sort of is sort of the genius of the idea of loving your neighbor as yourself. That idea is basically saying, take that self-interest that you have and make it revolve around your neighbor. Right? That the way you would love yourself, and loving yourself in that sense is basically acting in your own self-interest, not feeling good about yourself, which is how I think people tend to think about it. It's not that emotional sort of feeling good. So in a sense, you can act in your own self-interest even when you don't feel good about yourself. So in that sense, you are in fact loving yourself even when you don't feel good about yourself. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah,
and in a sense, we always act in our own self-interest, even when we
think we're not
hate ourselves.
Yeah,
exactly. Like even if I,
it's default, it's default mode. And I
think if I do something to sabotage myself, there's a sense in which sometimes we sabotage ourselves because we somehow have come to see it as in our self-interest to sabotage ourselves. Right? Which is where therapy comes in. Therapy often is about undoing all of those twisted sort of ways we
sabotage ourselves, self-sabotage
ourselves sometimes.
Ding, ding, ding. He uses therapy
but sometimes
words.
In our self-interest, it's almost like, oh, I'm afraid of doing this thing.
Yeah.
But if I don't, I'm just an example. I'm not saying this is what always happens, but this is an example of how it can happen. I'm afraid of doing this, and if I do it, I will feel like I failed. So I'm just going to I'm going to make sure I'm not able to do it.
Yeah.
So that way I don't have to deal with failure.
Okay. And
in that sense, we've sabotaged ourselves, but we're doing it to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
From something else we're afraid of. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's an example of how that can sometimes work. But yeah, it's and I think that self-interest is what drives us, is what cannot drives us, but like what can lead people to use power over others, because a lot of times it goes back to that, wanting to either get someone out of the way or wanting to just get something because you think, oh, there's a scarce resource here.
Yeah.
And if this person gets it, then I can't get it. So I have to make sure this person doesn't get it.
Yeah.
Right. Or it's just sometimes I want something and this person can give it to me, so I'm just going to take it from them.
Yeah. So,
right.
I rang the bell the other time when you used the T word, therapy. Ding, ding, ding. You remember how I said every episode we have, you always find a way to sneak it in, like, the mom at the dinner table sneaking in vegetables where the kids are not suspecting. And so I guess maybe, would it be safe
therapy vegetables?
Oh yeah, your therapy vegetables. This is your daily dose, guys. You're welcome. Would a good way to kind of live life be like have that working assumption that at the core of it, you're selfish and you might not always be using your power for good?
I won't use selfish, which is why I prefer the word self-interested, because again, selfish, I think, automatically makes it a bad thing.
But self-interested, it doesn't. I mean, I can see how...
I don't...
Self-centered.
I don't think self-interested... self-centered, I think, is still also
selfish in a way.
We think of self-centered as negative. Even self-interested can be seen as negative, but I feel like it's a bit more neutral than the other options. And the reason why I think that's important is because I'm thinking of the two big ideas of the only way to save yourself is to lose yourself, and if you love your neighbor yourself. And both of those, sort of biblical ideas are actually appeals to self-interest.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? Like they're not saying, oh, get rid of self-interest. What they're saying is actually this, if you want to really work to the best interest of yourself, flip things around a little bit. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, you want to save yourself, let it go. Let sort of do stuff. It's almost like delayed gratification, right?
Yeah.
Delayed gratification is what? It's like denying yourself now. So that but not just deny yourself for the sake of denying yourself, but deny yourself now so that you can get even more later.
Yes.
Well, it's self-interest. In the moment, though, it's not.
Okay.
And just what I mean. And a lot of therapy is also the same thing. A lot of therapy is about undoing what I would call maladaptive self-interest, which is, I'm going to do something now that benefits me in the short term. Right? Yeah. And then therapy is about actually, the thing that benefits you in the short term is harming you in the long term.
Yeah.
You actually need to do this thing that's going to be painful in the short term.
That can help
to get the real benefit that's long term.
Yes.
But it's not saying, oh, don't act your self-interest. It's saying you're misunderstanding what is yours. So basically, it's like you're misunderstanding what is actually in your interests.
Yeah.
And instead of doing what is truly in your interest, you're doing what feels like it's in your interest, but actually in the long term it's not.
Long term is not. Okay.
Do you see what I mean?
Yep.
So it's almost like like the idea of serving people with power. It's not, in a sense, there's a self-interest part to it of actually, not only is that serving the people, but could you imagine a sense in which you benefit far more that way ultimately than if you didn't?
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Do you think we should maybe share some examples about the power balance not the power balance, but the power we wield as Christians relative to the fallen world we live in? Or do you think that should be like a totally different topic?
It depends. How are you thinking about it?
Like the implications for Christians. You know how, let me just give this example of how we've always had this fear of, the world kind of like some Christians feel like victims. So like the church as a whole sometimes, and then we enter into political space as a way to kind of protect Christianity. And how Christ has called us not to be like when Jesus came to the world, right? He could have, overturn any government. And you can even hear some of his disciples hinting at him, maybe running for office and whatnot. And he goes
they're very about the
exactly.
Let's get political.
Let's get political. And he was like, no, that even when he did that whole parable of what's on the coin, like not parable, like he said, whose face is that on the coin? Like, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. But I think that the modern church hasn't really done a good job in just separating political power from like influence and power, like the way the church, especially here in the West. So that was what I was thinking. Maybe it's something you think we should talk about.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's coming from fear. So maybe that's another thing that leads us to
use our power.
Or maybe it still goes back to the scarcity thing, right? It's like we feel that things are scarce. And people I think as humans, we're kind of generally at our worst when we're thinking about things in terms of scarcity.
Yeah.
And a good example of that was COVID.
And toilet paper.
Exactly, right? Because why did toilet paper disappear? I mean, there were other issues, and I think some of it was supply chain issues, but there was also very much a scarcity thing at play where people were like, oh my goodness, there's not going to be any toilet paper. So you know what I'm going to do?
I'm going to stock up.
I'm going to grab all the toilet paper. Right? And it makes you think about this sort of manna story
Yeah.
Right. Of the idea of get the manna
Scarcity.
you need for yourself
For day.
and trust that there'll be manna tomorrow.
Per day. You can't keep it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Which is like, so you have to trust that there will be manna
tomorrow. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is then what becomes codified in the Lord's Prayer, the part of Lord's Prayer that says, give us this day our daily bread. And it's still about that idea of, again, are you able to not like live without planning, but also to live in a way that you stay open to trusting and not grabbing everything now because you want to make sure that you're basically scarcity, right? Yeah. And it's hard. It's not easy. And especially when everybody seems to be grabbing everything, and then you think, sometimes there's a funny thing where sometimes you don't want something, but then everybody's going for it, and you think maybe I should just get it just in case. Even though you don't actually want that thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what's happened with political power sometimes, where it's that fear of wanting to be in power, wanting to be the one controlling things, wanting to be one deciding how things go. Right? And some of it is also not wanting to, you could argue that some of it is also coming from a place where, well, maybe because you've done that to other people for a while, you don't want to risk that being done to you. It's like how people who steal are always afraid of being stolen from. And people who lie are always worried about being lied
to, and they get very paranoid about it.
There's a bit of projection going on, and I think sometimes when there's that desire to grab power, especially by, sort of organizational church, it's, is this really coming from a place? Could this also be coming from a place of knowing that, well, we've not treated people right? So you're scared that they will now, if they get there.
Yes. Crack the whips.
But then it's like, maybe instead of trying to make sure they never get power, maybe you should try treating people right.
Yes, in the first place, right? So you don't have to worry and look back. Right. And always, be watching your back as you proceed in life.
Yeah, exactly. But then the other side of it is also the fact that I think at the root of Christian thinking is the idea that that power is not something that needs to be fought for. But that actually power is something that already exists in the actions we take. That our actions matter and our actions have impact, and that love has impact, and that truth has impact, and that these things are forms of power, right? Truth and love and acting, and prayer. That these things have power in themselves.
Yeah.
And I think some of it is maybe we've lost some of our faith in that. And then we try to make up for that with political power.
And I think the saddest part is just the world watching, right? If anything, it doesn't preach Christ, right?
Well, but again, it goes back to the fact that it's just human nature, though.
I do.
And some of it is about acting above our nature, so to speak. Yeah.
Okay.
But I think, that's probably why it's hard. It's hard because, yes, it's hard. Right? Like, nobody ever said it was going to be
easy, right?
It's basically going against sort of our instincts.
Self-preservation. And for in some cases, it could serve well. So I understand how you want to use self-interest rather than saying selfish. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because even the self-preservation, like self-preservation itself is not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing, yeah.
But then it's like, what is of how you're trying to preserve yourself? So I think, for instance, imagine a parent who is trying to protect their child at risk to their own life, right? That's, in a sense, to the parent, that is self-preservation. For the parent in that moment, and well, not in that moment, in general, it's almost like if I lose this child, I've lost myself. It's almost like, what self am I preserving if I lose this child? Right?
So the future is lost.
This child is the self. The self And that's really what love your neighbor as yourself means. It's like love this other person as if they were you.
Yes.
And attach your self-interest to this person such that it's almost like I cannot feel good about myself if this person continues, if I don't do what I can do to help this person, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
So, I mean, the point I'm trying to make is that in a sense, the parent is sacrificing, but in another sense, the parent is genuinely acting in their own self-interest.
Yeah.
You know, in a sort of, but not in a direct, it's sort of more roundabout way. You know, and not just parents, obviously, like friends do it as well. And in any relationship that's healthy and beautiful, that's always happening.
So, I mean, I don't know. I feel like this episode kind of stands out differently in the sense that we've talked about something, but it feels like we haven't really talked it. Like, I don't know. Is there something else that, I guess, like maybe some personal anecdotes we can add that can really bring it back home? Or maybe actionable items. I don't know, the episode is feeling a little bit flat to me. Like we've just been talking around. I guess it goes back to just what power is. Just because we don't really talk about it, maybe that's why I feel like I'm struggling to think about things to talk about. So almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, as it were.
I mean, I think, yeah, it's big, which is why I think it's worth sort of thinking about, like, so which is why I use the example of like with patients. But actually everything I said about how I work with patients applies to people we work with who are under us. You have power over someone you're working with. You could harm them, or you could help them. Right? It applies to parents and children. It applies to and it applies even in relationships that are equal, right? Whether that's marriage or, you know, friendships or whatever. Because even in those relationships, there's this, you know, there's something you said earlier about shifting power dynamics. So for instance, someone may have more power in one area, like, which goes back to like the whole strength thing. Like, even in any relationship, there's power dynamics. Even in equal relationships, what you have is sort of equilibrium of power, where someone may have power in one area and someone else may have power in another area. So for instance, one person may be sort of more sociable, right? And that person may be, I don't know, may have more creative ideas or whatever. And then depending on the circumstance, one person may sort of be at the forefront while the other sort of takes the back seats. But then they may be in another circumstance and then that flips around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think I think the first thing is just really to be aware of. So I'll give an example of where power dynamics change things. Is this common thing where, you know, sometimes people get jealous of their friends. And I think it often happens where two people are equal.
And then something changes.
Or worse, one person thinks of themselves secretly as superior to the other person. And then the sort of,
in quotes,
the sort of, you know, the sort of subordinate / or equal person becomes powerful or gains some kind of power. And sometimes they may not see it as power, but to the other person,
it's like, wow.
The other person perceives it as power. And it might be anything from getting a well-paying job to, I mean, even things like getting married. Like, where the person who is not married may perceive the married person as having power.
This one just got married. This one can get married before me.
And now they have some kind of advantage over me.
Yeah.
Which may not necessarily be how that person sees it.
Yeah.
But again, and that's another thing about this stuff. Perception is so important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where if someone perceives you as having power over them, then sorry, they see you as having power over them. Whatever you think,
it doesn't really matter. Yeah.
And so again, I think it's also important to even be aware of, do people perceive me as having power over them? And if they do, what kind of power do they? So 2 questions I think that are worth thinking about is, especially for relationships that are important to us.
Mm-hmm.
What are the power dynamics in this relationship? And more importantly, what does the other person think are the power dynamic in these relationships?
Good question.
Right?
So my question to you is, what's the power dynamic between us?
Well, I see it as equal, and I think you don't necessarily see it as equal.
No, I don't.
You know, and we've talked about that.
Yes. And I think,
but you see, this is the thing. Like, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with. I think it's fine for there to be a difference, but I think it's good to be aware of, like, for me, the point of being aware of how the other person sees is not necessarily about, oh, you must see it the same way.
Yeah.
It's just being aware.
Okay.
Because once you're aware, then it means that, and this is the thing, someone said something that people don't like. I think it was Pastor Koju that said this, and he was quoting someone else who I can't remember now. But he said people don't have a problem with successful people. What people have a problem with is successful people who they feel are rubbing it in their face. Now, what I found is sometimes you are perceived as rubbing it in someone's face simply because they don't perceive you
to be
as someone who should have been successful in the first place.
Yeah.
So it may not even necessarily be doing anything.
Yeah, you might not be bragging about it.
Is the rub. The fact that you are successful
it's
itself
a slap in the face.
Is the rub. Exactly. Right? And it's important to be aware of those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And I've seen relationships where somebody was able to say to that person, do you know what, I'm actually feeling a little jealous of you, but I know that I need to work on that because I'm the problem here. And I get that.
I had a friend tell me that, like, do you know you're intimidating? And I'm like, oh. And she goes, but it's okay. I just wanted to let you know. But what it does for me is it strives me to be better at this other thing. Like, you have an ease of getting things done. That's
a very mature person. That's someone who has taken ownership. Again, that's what I'm saying about recognition. So they recognize it, but they also recognize this is something I need to work on.
Yes.
The solution here is not to diminish this person.
Yeah.
The solution is to increase myself.
Yes.
So to speak. But not increase myself to make them smaller.
Yes.
But increase myself to be able to carry them, to be able to increase myself,
amplify myself, to be able to use my power for good to bring them along as well.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And that's a beautiful thing, but it's not necessarily common, and I wish it was more common. And maybe having language to speak about it may help with that. But I think there's just that value of being able to say what's the dynamics here, but also just as important, how does the other person perceive those dynamics? And then the sort of second question to ask is, especially where the dynamics are perceived to be imbalanced, especially when you think that the dynamics are perceived to be imbalanced in your like where you are perceived as having the greater power, so to speak.
Yeah.
Then there's a place for treading lightly.
Yeah.
And this is tricky because I think people often think sometimes that, I need to make myself smaller. Because somebody's uncomfortable.
Yes. Or you just even avoid dealing with them.
And
in the first
think
place.
There's a difference between that and saying no. It's more about thinking about how can I, if somebody perceives me as having greater power over them, it's important that I engage with them in a way that is less heavy-handed.
But isn't that just in cases
so
where
it's not about making myself smaller, but it's about making my touch lighter.
Yes, but intentional.
My power remains the same.
Yes.
But my touch is lighter. Now, sometimes that lighter touch may simply mean stepping back from the person. That's the truth.
I wanted to say that because sometimes it could, no matter what you do.
The lighter touch is literal.
I'm a lighter power.
Right? Sometimes it may in fact mean that.
Because especially if the person, no matter what you do, the person is still going to perceive you one way. And there's you can never win.
Sometimes it may mean literally stepping back.
Yes.
But sometimes it may mean things like, so I've been in situations, for instance, where with certain friends who I felt were not bothered, but like maybe saw certain things that I had as a bit intimidating.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily bring that part, sort of becomes less part of our relationship. Now, yes, that means the friendship suffers in a sense but I won't say suffers.
It's not
because
quite.
at the end of the day, I think a friendship is what is going to be what is going to be, and it means that this friendship may not be the most intimate friendship I have, and that's fine.
Yeah,
not every friendship can be.
Has to be deep. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And like, well, if this level the friendship is going to be at, then that level is going to be at.
This is what it is,
and it's fine.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I think I'll again, let me go back to like the patient's example because, but I think it's something people can easily apply is because I know. So one of the things I've learned is that, people the worst of people comes out when they feel trapped.
Oh yeah. Like the animalistic instinct just to throw everything at the problem. Yeah.
And it's all of us, not just patients, to be clear. Like, I'm not talking about patients. That's why I said of people in general.
Yeah.
Now, for the patients that I work with, of course, because they are detained, they understandably
I don't know why that made me
feel
laugh.
trapped.
I don't know why that made me laugh. Sorry.
Right? Sorry, detained is the word we use in the UK.
Okay.
Committed is what you would use in the US.
Yes. Okay, detained is for people in police custody, by the way. Which is why you guys are the colonizers.
Well, some people use section, but section is not really the proper, like the official. So section is sort of more colloquial.
Yeah.
And then detained is like the because the idea of detained is to capture the fact that they are here against their will.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So similar to what police are doing, but the point is, it's not criminal. It's focused less on what they've done to deserve it or not, and more on what is being done to them.
Okay.
And I think the reason why the word detained is also used is to capture the fact that it's not ideal. And so you don't want to do it any longer than is absolutely necessary. Right? You're detaining someone. That's not a great thing to be experiencing. So you don't want to extend it beyond the absolute necessity.
Okay.
So people feel trapped, right? I get patients who sometimes they'll say, "Oh, I'm in prison," and it's not because they are disoriented. They know they're in hospital, but they're saying what it feels like, right? Which is, it feels like prison. Now, so they already feel trapped, and then I come up to them, and sometimes they can be quite angry and upset, and it's not great. Sometimes they say some
not so nice things.
Nasty things.
Yeah.
And while that's not excusable,
it's understandable. Yeah.
You see what I mean? And sometimes when I say it's not excusable, I mean like sometimes not necessarily the mental illness. Sometimes it's also just like
being rude.
It's just anger.
Yeah.
Right? It's anger. But it's anger coming from the way they understand the situation. One of the things that I found to be very helpful is to always to give, and it's something that, we're all supposed to do, but it's one thing to know it, it's another thing to sort of figure out how to do it on a daily basis. And it's basically the idea of giving them as much autonomy as possible.
Yeah.
Right? Like, okay, fine. Yeah, you don't have the ability to do certain things,
but you can do this other thing.
Like simply just walk away.
Yeah.
But yes, and then also involving them in everything that's happening as much as possible.
Okay.
And most of all, but especially, and this is the biggest part. So sometimes you have conversations with them about, things that are happening, and so a patient might say, "Well, I want to leave the ward," and then you have to say, "Well, actually, unfortunately, we don't think that's a good idea at the moment," which can make them feel trapped, right? Or telling them that they're going to have to take this medication, whether they like it or not, which can make them feel trapped. And so usually you don't want to come at it that way. You want to come at it as gently, as light, again, which is where the light touch thing comes in.
Yeah.
Right? There's a power there. It's almost like the example of like, so in work, sometimes the worst kind of work situation is where you have to say, "I'm your boss."
You've already lost.
You don't want to have to say, "I'm your boss."
Yeah.
You want them to do it because they think what you're saying makes sense. You want them to do it because they respect you, because you've earned that respect. Now, occasionally you do sometimes have to say to people, "I'm your boss." But by the time you get to that point, it's not great.
Yeah.
Now, what you don't want to do is start there. Do you get?
Yeah.
So it's sort of like that. It's sort of like understanding that dynamic. And because at the end of the day, the power is to serve. And so it's sort of carrying people along and sort of helping them understand that, look, you're in hospital and you're unable to leave.
Yeah.
But actually, my goal is to get you out of here as quickly as possible. But we need to think about risks. You need to think about the risks to yourself. You need to think about the risks to other people, blah, 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 and all of this stuff. And this is the path that I think will help us get there the quickest. One of the favorite questions I love asking is, okay, I'm sorry you have to be in hospital, but while you're here in hospital, what can we do
to make your stay better?
This? Yes, exactly, right?
You're right.
No, but it's an important question, and it's sometimes it's simple things like, oh, I need a phone or I need a radio, right? You're not always able to do it,
but at least you tried
where you can.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's risky, so sometimes it's like, oh well, I need something. I was like, would love to give you that, but then maybe it could harm you, and we've got concern to be we've got reason to be concerned about your possibility of harming yourself. Oh, but I say, well, this thing is something someone could use to harm themselves, but we're not seeing that with you, so yeah, we'll go ahead with it. So you kind of have to think about it with each person differently. But the point is, you're doing what you can. It's like, well, this is not going to be possible, but how about this? And is there anything else that you would like? And if we can do it, we're going to do it. So it's about the lightness, is basically what I'm saying.
And I think from the examples you gave, it seems like whoever is more dominant in that situation will be the one providing the light touches. Because I can't think of a situation where.
Oh yes, it has to be.
I can't think of a situation where a patient has power over the doctor, except when they're holding them, at gunpoint and whatnot. But usually, from a doctor-patient relationship, the doctor has to strive to restore some form of autonomy. Because the position.
And this is where it's important to recognize your power. Because if you think, oh, you're equal when the other person is perceiving you as more powerful.
Yeah.
Then you're just missing out on all of that.
Yeah. And even going back to our example, so I know you think that we're equals, but I could never accept that. Not like I could never accept that, but I think there's always going to be that. So if you cast your mind back to the very first episode when we talked about friendship and you said best friend, the reason I really struggled with it was, we're not, like, you're older than me, and I'm not saying that like being like an ageist or anything like that. Like,
yeah, no, you're just being ageist.
No. So like in Korean culture, which I don't know what I'm even saying about Korean because I'm not Korean. You can't call you.
I was gonna say sorry that you grew up in.
Right? But it helped me understand just why I was struggling with just the best friend analogy would be. The word for friend is chingo. You can never call somebody that is a year older or a year younger than you chingo. Your chingo is always going to be your peers, like the same age. You were born in the same year. Everybody else is maybe chinan, saram or anun onni, like somebody I know, somebody I'm close to. But the friend, so even me calling you a friend, it feels like that's acceptable. But because of, experience-wise, I definitely see you as someone that is more advanced, and even and maybe because I live that in a subjugate. I put myself in that position because I want to always keep being open to learning from you. I don't know. It's not saying that if we're peers or anything like that, I wouldn't learn from you. and I think I put myself in that position normally, so I can feel like I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. Does that make sense?
You don't know how to explain it, but does that make sense?
But I've said a lot of things, and I'm
I know what you mean.
I'm kind of rambling, and I think it's.
I just love that juxtaposition.
Yeah, I know, right? No, because I feel like I'm just rambling over and over again. But for me, recognizing the power you have, I don't know if I have power in this relation. Not like I know I don't have power. But I'm okay being this way because I tend to gain more from that perspective. I don't know if that makes sense. So it's almost like my self-interest is kicking in.
No, but I get it, because we've talked about it, and I get where you're coming from. And like I said, Yeah, sorry. I don't think it's a useful goal to that we must see it equally. I don't think that's a useful goal.
Yeah.
I think a more useful goal is understanding how we each see it and being able to work with that.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
So for me, it's fine. Like, it's fine. How you see it is how you see it, and like,
it's what it is.
I'm not going to say, oh, you see it like this. No, like, it's blue dress, green dress.
But do you think it affects our relationship in any way?
You don't have to see blue dress.
Oh, I know. But do you think this is maybe taking away from the quality of our relationship? Does it matter?
I don't think so, because the quality of relationship is the quality of relationship.
So where does a light touch? Where does a light touches come in place? Like, how do you? I wanted to touch lightly, but that kind of sounds very, harassment. Like, but
well, so I'll give you an example.
Okay.
The fact that I know that means that if you ask for my advice, for instance, I'm normally a bit forceful in how I say things. Not so much with you, since I've come to understand that.
Yeah.
And for instance, I was doing that before because I kind of knew.
Okay.
Do you get? Before we had that conversation, I knew that. I picked up on it. And I think even in that conversation, I mentioned that, I'm aware of this.
Yeah. Look at you.
Because there's a forcefulness you can have with somebody that you know is just going to ignore you.
Yeah.
That you don't want to have with someone that you know will just... It's not like you do whatever I say, but like, sort of gives the opinion a bit more weight.
Yeah.
Then the fact that your opinion already has weight, so you don't want to put any extra weight to it.
Yeah.
Because then you don't want it to become unnecessarily heavy, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of awareness. Like, the power you have, and I know, like, the relative position, and I think is what makes our friendship work. Yeah. So, and I think that's just the strong power of awareness, and I guess the lesson here is, for those that are listening, examine your relationships and think about the power you bring or the relative position you have. And are there some areas where you want to apply light touches? Are there some areas where you want to help, like, use your power to kind of elevate people up? Yeah.
Yeah. And in relationships where you may feel like you are the less powerful person, also thinking about, are you okay with that? Are you struggling with that? Whether that struggling is coming from your own struggling because of like insecurity or because you perceive the other person as misusing that power.
Yeah.
And it's important to also think about that perception too. And is this perception actually them misusing the power? Or is it just you being
insecure,
unnerved at them having the power, even though they're not necessarily doing anything with it yet?
Yeah. How about those that are currently feeling like they might be prone to insecurity? Like, what are some of the things you can do? Because, I mean, I imagine that if you're in a place where you feel like this other friend of yours gets things done, or they've attained something that you're like, how come you get this before me? How can they work around their insecurity issues?
I mean, that's a whole thing. I think what I might say would be, again, first of all, being aware of it, which itself can be very hard. Like, admitting that we are insecure is one of the most difficult things to do. So that in itself is a huge step. Because usually what we tend to do is sort of displace it or and maybe get angry or act out or stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think once you're able to admit it, then you can think about things like one way to simply engage might be to be honest with the other person, like your friend did, and say, look, I feel this type of way, but I'm not. That's not on you. That's not your problem.
Yeah.
Some of it could also be talking to other people that are not the person that you feel that way with. It may be a therapist, but it may be friends, good friends that you trust and respect, or that sort of thing, and sort of, and there's also value sort of running some of these things by, like, okay, I feel this way, but I'm wondering, is it me? Am I reading too much into it? And again, obviously, you still have to decide whatever people tell you. So you have to think about
the weight you're giving it. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Because obviously they might be misreading it, and be open to making mistakes, because at the end of the day, no matter how you go about it, you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's inevitable.
But then the hope is to try and learn from them.
Yeah. And even though we started this episode talking about power, the core of it is still relationships. Kind of like with the superpower on communities episode, you cannot know those things unless you're in a relationship. And chances are you might have power in one relationship, maybe in the other relationship you might be the one just being insecure. So those things are not fixed. They change from one relationship to the other. But we just hope that this episode has, left you with just reflecting about what you bring to a relationship and maybe conversations that needs to be had. Because I think the more we talk about just what those things are, I think it kind of can deepen your relationship and have conversations even when things are really quite awkward, right? But we have avoid having them. Yeah. Yes,
absolutely. I think some of the most beautiful relationships I've had came from just being honest about that dynamic.
Yeah. And saying that we're all equal, that doesn't really help, because are you really equal,
Exactly. I mean, because equality is, I think ultimately is equilibrium, is not sameness,
Yeah.
It's about, there's dynamics, but they're in equilibrium. They're balancing each other out.
Yeah.
But I think the problem of saying we're all equal is that it's assuming, we're all actually the same.
Yeah.
It's like, no,
and
we're not the same.
It's a conversation ender. Like, it's like, after you say people, then there's nothing new to be gained anyway. Which, again...
It's almost like, there's no more racism. So if you talk about racism... Then
Or I have a black friend, so I can't be racist. Yeah, that kind of thing. Anyways, I don't know. I'm done with all of my questions. I think I like this episode because it forced me to just think about things I hadn't thought about in a while, or even, talked about. And I think you're about the only person I've ever talked about power with, because we don't really talk about it, But I'm done with my thoughts. I don't know if you had any final thoughts before we close it off.
Not really. I feel like I've said a lot as it is. I feel like I think if I was going to say one last thing, it'd just be awareness itself is a kind of power.
Both the one who holds power and the one who's maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Cool. Well, this was it, guys. We started this episode talking about power, and even though it felt like we talked about a lot of things, we hope that you'll gain one or two things. But as always, if there are ways you would like for us to support you on the show, perhaps explore additional topics that might be of interest, don't forget to reach out to us through email, talktomo@monsible.com, or on our Instagram page at the Monsible Podcast. So just check out the website and there's a contact us from there. As always, we hope you enjoy this episode and catch you guys on another episode of the Monsible Podcast. This is Mo and...
Ayomide.
Peace out, guys.